There comes a moment in every reflective person's life when they pause and quietly ask, am I truly in control of my mind, or is my mind controlling me? It is not a loud question. It does not announce itself. It arrives softly, like a crack in certainty, a brief disturbance in the image we hold of ourselves. And inside that disturbance, something important begins: awareness. I believe that to master the mind, one must first stop mistaking the ego for the whole of the self. Most people live at the surface of their personality. They identify with opinions, achievements, reputation, and wounds, assuming these define them completely. Yet the psyche is far deeper. Beneath the ego lies the unconscious, and within it exists the shadow, the archetypes, and ultimately the self, the totality of who we truly are. The ego is necessary. It helps us function, relate, and survive. But it is also fragile. It fears insignificance, rejection, and invisibility. Because of this fear, the ego seeks validation, admiration, and control. When someone becomes overly identified with this surface identity, narcissistic tendencies begin to appear, not because the person loves themselves too much, but because they do not truly understand themselves at all. In my psychology, narcissism is compensation. It is what happens when the ego builds a grand image to protect a wounded interior. The narcissistic mind is defended, not confident. It does not seek truth. It seeks reinforcement. It does not seek connection. It seeks confirmation. To understand this, I'd like to direct you toward the shadow. The shadow is everything we deny, repress, or refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. It contains insecurity, envy, dependency, anger, and fear, but also creativity, vitality, and emotional depth. Whatever the ego rejects is pushed into the shadow. And what is pushed away does not disappear, it operates invisibly. A narcissistic personality is often cut off from its shadow. The person becomes identified with a polished mask while disowning vulnerability and emotional truth. The more perfect the mask, the more active the shadow becomes beneath it. This is why narcissism often expresses itself through defensiveness, manipulation, superiority, and emotional distance. These are not signs of strength. They are signs of protection. The individual is not empowered. They are armored. When the shadow is denied, it begins to control the personality from behind the scenes. A person becomes reactive instead of reflective, dominant instead of connected, performative instead of authentic. Ironically, the more someone tries to escape their shadow, the more they are ruled by it. Projection is one of the clearest expressions of this. We see in others what we refuse to see in ourselves. We criticize selfishness while hiding our own neediness. We condemn arrogance while denying our own hunger for validation. Instead of asking, "What part of me is speaking?" the narcissistic mind asks, "What is wrong with them?" Mastering the mind begins when projection ends. It requires withdrawing attention from others and turning it inward. This is uncomfortable. Silence exposes us. Solitude confronts us. Without distraction, the psyche begins to reveal what we avoid: unmet needs, unresolved grief, forgotten desires, and hidden fears. Most people flee from this encounter. They seek noise, comparison, achievement, and entertainment. But I believe real psychological growth happens only through inwardness. The mind cannot be mastered in constant stimulation. It must be met in stillness. In solitude, you notice how much of your identity is borrowed, how many reactions are habitual, how many beliefs are defensive instead of conscious. You realize that much of what you call me is simply repetition, and awareness interrupts repetition. Emotions then become guides instead of enemies. Anger asks where boundaries were crossed. Envy asks what remains undeveloped. Anxiety asks what feels unsafe. Sadness asks what was lost. When emotion is ignored, it controls behavior. When emotion is understood, it becomes intelligence. The narcissistic mind fears emotion because emotion reveals dependency. But the integrated mind recognizes emotion as information. This leads to my central idea: individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, not superior. It is the integration of ego and unconscious, persona and shadow, thought and feeling. Most people imitate social roles. Few individuate psychologically. To individuate means to stop asking, "How do I appear?" and begin asking, "Who am I becoming?" It requires humility, the willingness to see limitations without collapsing into shame. Narcissism dissolves when humility appears, because humility replaces performance with presence. There is a vital difference between narcissism and self-love. Narcissism needs applause. Self-love needs honesty. Narcissism demands admiration. Self-love accepts imperfection. Narcissism is loud hunger. Self-love is quiet stability. Transformation begins when a person can say, "I am more than my image." This truth appears in the myth of Narcissus. Narcissus falls in love with his reflection, unaware it is himself. He reaches for an illusion and perishes trying to possess it. This is not as excessive self-love, but as self-alienation. Narcissus is disconnected from his real being and hypnotized by a false identity. The tragedy is not loving oneself too much. The tragedy is never knowing oneself at all. So how does one begin mastering the narcissistic mind? First, by acknowledging the wound beneath the armor. Many narcissistic traits grow from early experiences of neglect, criticism, or conditional love. The psyche learned that safety comes from performance and control. Healing begins with compassion, not condemnation. Second, through shadow work, facing suppressed emotions, unmet needs, and denied vulnerability. This demands radical honesty, but honesty dismantles illusion. Third, through conscious relationships. Narcissism isolates. Individuation connects. Real connection requires listening, presence, and emotional risk, not superiority. And finally, through meaning rather than ego control. The narcissistic mind seeks status. The mature mind seeks significance. Status fades. Meaning sustains. If you ever ask, "Am I narcissistic?" understand this. The question itself already signals awakening. Narcissism grows in unconsciousness. Healing grows in curiosity. We all carry narcissistic tendencies. The real choice is whether we remain trapped in them or evolve beyond them. My psychology does not offer comfort, but direction. It invites you to stop running from your reflection and start integrating your reality. Through awareness, humility, shadow work, and individuation, the mind transforms from prison into compass. And when the mind becomes conscious, life stops ruling you. You begin to rule yourself.